Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this video, I'll be reviewing and breaking down the newest episode of The Walking Dead, Season 7, Episode 13, Bury Me Here. Warning of spoilers for everything in the show up to Episode 713, and let's jump right into it. Alright, so this episode seems to be based entirely around the kingdom, just like 702, and let me just say right off the bat that this episode was amazing. It has gotten very positive fan feedback, at least from what I've seen. Let me know how you guys feel, but I really feel like this is the Carol and Morgan episode that we really needed to see. But alright, let's go ahead and look at the first scene of the episode, which is actually really short. It involves everyone putting in the single melon into the back of the truck that'll get brought up later, but for now, I just wanted to say that it was a really odd way to foreshadow what's to come, because it was really abrupt and was really kind of confusing. I guess that was the point, but I don't know, let me know what you guys thought about that. So moving on to Carol, we first see her waking up from night terrors in her bed in her house as she sits up and has a smoke to calm herself down. And so I wonder what exactly she was dreaming about. Was it over the possibility of her friends dying without her being there, or does it just involve her murdering again? Either way, I assume that was the final straw of trying to stay in denial, since she wakes up the next morning and heads to the kingdom to talk to Morgan. Meanwhile at the kingdom, we see Morgan training Benjamin's younger brother now as well, as he aspires to be just like Ben himself. Ben notices this on his way to head out to the front gates of the kingdom, and overhears his brother mentioning this as Morgan sorta leads him into saying it. And so by the time Ben gets to the gate of the kingdom to take out all the zombies collecting, Carol's already taking care of them. She walks right past Ben and all the other kingdom soldiers without saying a word, determined to find Morgan to ease her mind on what's happened. On her way here, actually, she killed multiple walkers without even trying. As I mentioned in my predictions video for this episode, they've just become more of an annoyance to her than an actual threat, and it was funny to watch her kill those walkers with that one-way street sign, although I'm unsure as to how realistic that is exactly. So as she arrives at the kingdom, she finds Morgan and straight up asks him if everyone back at Alexandria is alright. Carol explains to Morgan of her conversation with Daryl, leading Morgan to imply that whatever was said between them should stay between them. Even though Morgan tries to choose his words very carefully here, Carol can still instantly tell by Morgan's response that Daryl wasn't entirely truthful with her, and that some of her friends are probably hurt or dead. Morgan tells her that she needs to go back to Alexandria for herself if she wants to know everything that's happened to them, considering she tried running away from all of them for her own selfish reasons. And so Morgan brings up the fact that Carol got what she wanted, which was running away and finding somewhere quiet alone. He then asks her if that's really what she wanted or not, considering the fact that she's there asking him about her friends. And although Morgan recommends going to Alexandria with Carol, she just leaves on her own to go back to her house and think about things. On her way out, Benjamin annoyingly asks to tag along with her to learn how she's so level-headed around the walkers. Even though Benjamin seems to be very genuine in what he's asking, Carol turns him down as we know that she doesn't have the best history with kids. On Carol's way back to her place, she notices that the walker that she hit on her way there was hit again and killed by someone else. Considering that this was early in the morning, she looks around and wonders who could have possibly been out as well. She doesn't see anyone, so she walks away, but it's soon revealed that Richard was just creeping around the corner watching her beside this huge row of shopping carts. So Richard is shown to be the one to create the Bury Me Here grave, not Carol, like I initially predicted. He throws in his daughter's backpack as well, showing that he wanted to be buried beside the memory of her. Also, we can see a huge row of shopping carts that we saw in the trailer beside him, but we'll get back to that later. Now, I've already explained this entire scene in a different video along with King Ezekiel's perspectives in this episode in general, so feel free to check that out, as there's just way too much to break down here in one or two breaths. In short though, the kingdom relates to the garden as he cares so deeply about both and doesn't want to see either get destroyed. This scene helps King Ezekiel accept the fact that even though beautiful things can be destroyed, you can still recreate even better things afterwards. Anyways, during the next scene, as Morgan waits to leave for another meeting with the Saviors, Richard walks up to him and starts a conversation about Benjamin being too young to have to raise his brother. Richard mentions that he loved his life before the apocalypse, as he goes on to say that he was a dad at the perfect time of his life and had a perfect family. This leads him to ask Morgan of his past, to which he just nods, indicating that he was once a father himself. Richard mentions that although he doesn't believe in Morgan's mindset of not killing, he apologizes for the rough tension between the two of them. them. He says that he knows Morgan is a good man, and that if Morgan has to eventually end up killing, that he shouldn't beat himself up for it. This is obviously heavy foreshadowing for later in the episode, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. On their way to meet Gavin's group of saviors, the group from the kingdom stops in the middle of the road as they notice a random row of shopping carts. This is the same row of shopping carts shown beside Richard early in the episode, so we can only assume that he was involved with this. But why? As they go to check it out, they notice that it's shaped like an arrow pointed in the direction around one of the buildings. This leads them to the grave Richard seems to have dug, but he doesn't say anything about it. King Ezekiel just assumes that this was done by some random crazy person and gives a great speech, followed by Benjamin pointing out some positivity out of everything. We'll get back to Richard's true intentions later on, but for now, I just gotta say that I was so confused on why Richard would do this, along with not saying anything during it. Before the episode aired, I definitely thought it was Carol who dug this grave, but this is obviously shown to not be the case, so I was like, what the heck? And so with nothing really happening at that row of shopping carts, at least what looked like nothing, we can see Savior Jared impatiently waving Morgan's fighting, tells everyone to hand over their guns. He does this because things are about to get emotional, and as Gavin says, they don't handle emotional situations well, as shown in previous meetups. After Ezekiel agrees to hand over their guns, he's presented with the issue. He says that it's not possible, but it obviously is, and although Ezekiel suggests returning in an hour with twice the tribute, Gavin says that it doesn't matter, and right now is all that matters. I assume right now was some sort of code word for Jared to pull a gun out on Richard, because that's exactly what he does after clarifying that that's what Gavin means.
Right now.
Right now isn't... right now.
Yeah. Right now.
After clarifying, Jared pulls out his pistol and points it at Richard's face. Richard looks completely hopeless as he stares at Jared, encouraging him to do it and almost accepting it. And so a thing about the saviors is when they're giving out a punishment, they don't want the person to enjoy it. And so Jared seems to want to get revenge for Benjamin calling him a dirty little rat back when he hit Jerry, so instead of shooting Richard, he shoots Benjamin in the leg. And so I just need to make a huge complaint here. How dare they use a gunshot for a commercial cliffhanger? They did this when Rosita shot at Negan during episode 708, and they did it again here. Commercial break aside, it still completely ruins the momentum of the scene when you rewatch it. I was so excited to see what was about to happen considering Richard seemed to be accepting the way his fate was going here, but they just cut it with Morgan screaming no, and all I could do was roll my eyes. Anyways, soapbox aside, it turns out that Jared decided to step out of line himself and shoot Benjamin in the leg instead of Richard, and it's shocking to see the way Gavin responds to this, as he acts like he's even gonna get in trouble himself. It seems like they take the whole idea of killing the leader's right-hand man very seriously, along with the rules in general, considering that Jared got in trouble for going against that. During every meetup we've seen with Gavin, his group has threatened Richard's life in one way or another. This wasn't a Negan situation like when he told Arot to randomly kill somebody. Gavin said a specific code word, and that code word meant kill the right-hand man like they had discussed. Jared seriously fucked up here by shooting Ben, as he just completely ruined their entire plan, along with the fact that he shot a kid, which just makes everything look worse. The way Gavin is freaking out here, as I said before, almost makes me believe that Gavin was legitimately worried about getting in shit himself over it, as if he was gonna get demoted or something. So as he orders his men to stand down and get ready to leave, Morgan insists that they need to move Benjamin and get him back to the kingdom and get help. Before Gavin lets Ezekiel go, he tries to drill into his head the idea of him following orders one last time. King Ezekiel says that he understands, although he fucking hates Gavin at this point. So they try to get Benjamin back to the kingdom, but it turns out that they didn't have enough time, as they're shown frantically bringing Benjamin into Carol's house right in the middle of her just planting seeds outside her front door. They needed somewhere to bring him, but this obviously wasn't a good enough place as he ends up passing away anyways. It's not like Carol had a surgery table along with a stockpile of medical supplies, so putting a napkin on his leg was about the best that they could do. This was just completely horrible to watch, and it actually really annoyed me, as I was honestly hoping that Benjamin would at least make it past Season 7 and into All Out War. All Ezekiel can do is apologize to Carol for bringing him here, but says that they had no choice. Morgan abruptly leaves as he walks back to the kingdom alone to blow off some steam. He starts getting rapid flashbacks of episode 101, along with I believe 312 clear, as he feels like he's losing Dwayne all over again. He was reluctant to train Benjamin in the first place, but he ended up growing very close to him, leaving this to be a real stab in the gut. As Morgan starts having a complete freakout, he starts screaming phrases that he used to write on things back when he was still crazy. This implies that he's starting to revert back to his old self, as he's unable to control himself and restrain himself anymore. During this freakout walk back to the kingdom, he ends up finding the missing melon from the tribute to the saviors by coincidentally kicking over a small yellow bin, hiding it. At first, it just seems to be like insult to injury, considering it was the reason Benjamin ended up dying, but Morgan actually starts putting 2 and 2 together. He remembers that he saw Richard walking away from that yellow bin during the shopping cart roadblock, and starts to realize that it was probably Richard who caused all of this. That's why Richard was so eager to hand over their weapons to the saviors earlier, and also why he was so accepting of his potential death. He wanted the saviors to kill an unarmed man and make Ezekiel rise up because of it. Richard told Daryl that he would die for the kingdom, and that's exactly what he tried setting up. Richard used the shopping cart roadblock as a distraction so he could steal a melon from the back of the truck and hide it under that yellow bin. Richard wanted to die because of this, and he knew that they would choose him considering that they've been threatening his life literally every single meeting we've ever seen them go to. We watch Morgan enter Richard's room, throwing the yellow bin on the floor. This just causes Richard to completely open up to him, as he wants Morgan to understand why he acts the way he does. We've learned bits and pieces of Richard's story before, but here he fully explains to Morgan how he lost his family during the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. Richard lost his daughter in a similar way that Morgan lost Dwayne, and that was because he couldn't do something in time to save her. This is why Richard is so impatient to act on what he wants, and this is why he is so eager to make things right no matter what happens to accomplish that. Essentially, Richard is just saying everything and anything he can here to save his own ass and help Morgan sympathize with him and understand his motives. Richard explains why he feels the way he does and why he thinks the way he does. He defends his motives in a way that is definitely understandable, but that doesn't excuse the way he's been acting. Richard's motives are in the right place, it's just how he goes about accomplishing it that's wrong. And also during this conversation, Richard tries using Benjamin's death as a leverage over Morgan to try and help him turn against the saviors, saying how they need to kill them all. Although Morgan agrees with this now, it doesn't hide the fact that Richard got Benjamin killed. Richard tells Morgan that he needs to learn to kill once again, obviously unaware of Morgan's past. Richard is underestimating Morgan here, just like he did Carol back in 708, and with that being said, it's crazy to see the type of restraint Morgan is trying to maintain during this entire scene. And so concluding this conversation, Richard suggests that he'll just talk to King Ezekiel about all of this as well, fully admitting to what he did. He tells Morgan that he'll confess everything to Ezekiel and spend the rest of his life making up for it if that's what it case. Richard explains that he wants to do everything he can to get his message across, even if it includes throwing himself under his own bus. So as the day ends, Morgan contemplates what to do and what to think about everything. We see another depressing moment as Morgan overlooks Ezekiel telling Benjamin's younger brother about his death, but at least Ben died knowing that his brother inspires to be just like him. As the next morning arrives, Ezekiel watches his beautiful garden being torn up and thrown out to burn. As I mentioned in my breakdown, this relates to the fact that although Ezekiel tried so hard to help turn Benjamin into a strong, smart soldier, he still ended up dying. This brings us full circle to the beginning of the episode where we saw them packing up the one extra melon that they owe to the saviors, and so they head back to the parking lot to give it to them. As they get out, Morgan asks Richard if he confessed to Ezekiel like he said he would. Richard implies that he didn't, as he just mentions that now's not the time to talk about it. Ezekiel asks if everything's alright, and even though Richard insists that they'll talk about it later, Ezekiel insists that they'll talk about it now. That being said, as Gavin and Jared roll up and get out of their vehicles with the rest of their group, they find out that Benjamin has died. Gavin yells at Jared, threatening to get it and bring it to him. Before Richard can tell Gavin what he told Morgan he would tell to him, Morgan actually runs up behind Richard and hits him over the head with his staff. Morgan jumps on top of him and strangles him to death, shutting him up and putting an end to his bullshit. I'm sorry, Richard, I wanted to like your character back in 702, but you've just turned into an immoral asshole who would just get someone else killed. King Ezekiel, along with everyone else from the kingdom, watch in disgust as Ezekiel demands that Morgan stops, but Gavin insists that they let him continue. So after Morgan is finished murdering Richard, which by the way, god damn man, he calmly explains to everyone of everything that's happened, catching them up to speed.
He set it all up. He blocked the road yesterday, made us late. And we had your offering when we left. Had it all. He took one from the cargo and he hid it when we stopped. He wanted to get something started between the kingdom and the saviors.
Morgan then stands up and completely replaces Richard as he continues saying what Richard was about to. All Gavin does is acknowledge that they understand how to cooperate from now on. He takes the cantaloupe and he leaves them alone. And by the way, just one more thing I wanted to mention here. I think it's kind of funny how Gavin sort of just stands back when Morgan stands up, almost like he's scared from him after just watching him murder Richard. And this whole thing here definitely just shows the saviors that the kingdom isn't fucking around and they'll kill if they have to. Anyways, after the saviors leave, Ezekiel and Morgan continue their conversation about Richard. Morgan actually gets so worked up in the moment that he misplaces Benjamin's name for Dwayne, his son back from season 1. This was a huge moment as everyone just sort of stares at him like, what? Along with the audience at this point, and so Ezekiel insists on Morgan coming back with them to go to the kingdom, but Morgan yells at them, telling them to go on without him and to leave him alone. And so, as the kingdom soldiers leave Morgan behind, he stabs Richard's brain with the same knife that he stabbed Benjamin's brain with the day before, making sure that they won't come back as walkers. We see Morgan dragging Richard's body all the way back to the grave Richard dug as a distraction earlier, and Morgan starts burying him there just like the sign says. As Morgan is burying him, he finds the backpack that Richard had near the beginning of the episode. This backpack belonged to his daughter Katie, and I assume that Richard left it here because he wanted her to be mentioned at his funeral, along with having it buried alongside him considering she was so important to him. And so as Morgan is currently broken between being a peaceful monk and a crazy murderous psychopath, he ends up going to see Carol while taking out more of his anger on a few walkers along the way. He ends up at her house and he asks her if she really wants to know what happened back at Alexandria. She says yes, and Morgan comes right out with it. He tells her that Negan murdered Glenn and Abraham with Lucille, along with mentioning that they killed Spencer and Olivia as well. They also killed Denise too. Why do people keep forgetting that? I suppose it was just Dwight, but still, it should still count for something. Anyways, as Morgan finishes telling Carol that Alexandria works for the Saviors now, he decides to leave. Carol makes him wait, telling him that he can go and not go, which is in reference to what King Ezekiel told her back in 702. And so, I suppose Morgan decides to stay at Carol's house, while she in turn decides to go back to the kingdom. And to close this episode off, we watch her approach Ezekiel as he's starting to replant his beloved garden. She approaches him saying that they need to get ready to fight, and he agrees. At this point, Ezekiel doesn't need any more convincing. He understands now why they can't live alongside the Saviors, and he wants to begin planning for a better tomorrow. Although we didn't get to see too much between Carol and Ezekiel at the end of this episode, I hope that we'll see a lot more conversation between the two of them, especially considering the fact that Carol has decided to stay at the kingdom now. What did you guys think about the episode? I feel like this definitely was a good payoff for any Carol or Morgan fans, and I hope that we get to see more of them continuing in the right direction in the future. Carol is finally accepting the fact that she shouldn't hide from the people that she cares about, and I hope that she can learn how to be a proper asset in the future without being a traumatized murderer. Morgan, on the other hand, is trying to figure out how to keep a balance between his crazy murderous self and his passive mindset. Morgan really went from one end of the spectrum to the other after meeting Eastman back in 604, and I hope that he can find a normal balance in his emotions along with his decision-making skills in general. Let me know how you guys feel about Carol and Morgan down in the comments section below, along with any other thoughts about the episode in general. Feel free to hit the thumbs up button on the video if you enjoyed anything I've said today, as it definitely helps me out a ton. I'm glad that so many of you enjoy talking about this show as much as I do, And that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.